Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, which is the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. There's more information on our website, womensdeclaration.com, where you'll find our declaration on women's sex-based rights, which has been signed by 38,117 people from 160 countries and is supported by 229 organisations. WDI has volunteer activists, including country contacts from every continent, and do join us. Today, we are going to hear, first of all, about surrogacy, surrogacy around the world, modern slavery sold as reproductive solutions, from Marie-Josèphe Devillers from France. Then we're going to hear from Patrizia Tancredi from Belgium, Women Against Surrogacy Belgium. Then we're going to have some questions about their talks, which are focused on surrogacy. And then we're going to move on to the sort of second section of our webinar, which will be about the United Nations and international institutions and the spread of gender identity ideology. We're going to hear from Amparo Domingo about the WDI UN Working Group, what we do and why it matters. We're going to hear from Maria Binetti about why does the UN matter and what's it doing, the Inter-American Commission and the UN. And then we're going to hear from Dianne Post about the proposed new draft articles on the prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity and how it's using the term gender, not sex. Hopefully I'm accurate on that, but Dianne will make that clear. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, who is Marie-Josèphe Devillers. She's one of the three co-chairs of ICASM, the International Coalition for the Abolition of Surrogate Motherhood. She's also a lesbian activist. And Marie-Josèphe's talk is Surrogacy Around the World, Modern Slavery Sold as Reproductive Solutions. So thank you so much. Welcome, Marie-Josèphe, and over to you.
I will first introduce our coalition, then give a quick idea on how surrogacy develops worldwide, and finally come to our topic, surrogacy, modern slavery sold as reproductive solution. The coalition was created in 2018. We made it clear from the very beginning that as feminists, we don't have nothing to do with conservative people and far-right political parties who are also opposed to surrogacy. The four feminist principles that we put forward are equality between men and women, emancipation and autonomy of women, legal access to abortion and contraception, equality between heterosexuals and homosexuals. Surrogacy for us is a social practice. It's not a medical practice. And it's also a globalized industry. Surrogacy is a violence against women and should be included as such in international instruments. And the abolition of surrogacy should be part of the feminist agenda. In our mapping of violence against women, surrogacy is classified under reproductive exploitation, along with a trade in oocytes, forced pregnancy, forced sterilization, forced abortion, and prohibition on contraception and abortion. Let's take a look at the different countries' policies about reproductive surrogacy. Roughly, there are three main systems behind the way governments tackle surrogacy at national level. First, the ban. It is the case in most European countries. In Europe, one of the core values is human dignity. It is the first item in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And it is in the name of human dignity that surrogacy is banned in most countries in Europe, but it's changing right now. Regulation. Pragmatism leads to a regulation. As long as surrogacy exists, it must be regulated. That is the way political people think. UK is a good example of that. Commercial surrogacy, free trade and individual freedom are the values leading to opening up widely to surrogacy. This is the case in the United States. Our aim as feminists is to tip the balance in favor of human dignity in every country against the growing trend towards neoliberalism. Surrogacy is developing rapidly. A few years ago, we could think that surrogacy was far away from us, but it's getting closer and closer. I will just mention 3 cases that I came across recently. When Women MEP told us that it was very difficult for her to vote against surrogacy because members of her family were already using surrogacy. A young woman was stopped on the street by a man saying, "Oh, you are so beautiful. Would you agree to give me some of your eggs?" She even felt proud of it. Another young woman told us that their gay friends have asked her to become their surrogate. She was quite shocked, but felt she had to do it because of the compassion she felt for them. But luckily, she came back to her senses and refused. There is a growing demand for surrogate babies, which is driven by patriarchal culture. In East Asia, under influence of Confucianism, women must produce a male heir. In some African countries, women must give birth to be considered a woman. Desperate women from rich couples in those countries are trying to find a solution. Insemination first, then IVF, last step, surrogacy. It is how a specific medical field specializes in surrogacy, first for domestic surrogacy, and later on for cross-border surrogacy. This is the case right now in Uganda. In Western countries, the desire to have a child is promoted as a right to a child, but not any child, a child genetically related to the male part of the commissioning couple. And the industry is very, very powerful and invent new products. Many stakeholders are involved in surrogacy: brokers, clinics, lawyers, psychologists. Yes, psychologists. Lately in Quebec, psychologists have been instructed to assess any surrogacy projects, meeting with the clients and with the surrogate. Surrogacy is part of their business. The industry has developed a strong communication and lobbying force. And the industry is very efficient at moving their business when the law restricts access to surrogacy in one country. For example, some brokers and clinics transferred part of their business from India to Kenya when India restricted access to surrogacy in 2015. As Georgia is planning to stop commercial surrogacy, clinics and brokers might move, for example, to Thailand. Thailand is ready to reopen to cross-border surrogacy. Political people in Thailand put it clearly: surrogacy brings foreign currencies. Is surrogacy a modern form of slavery? According to Article 1 of the Geneva Convention, slavery is a status or condition of a person over whom any or all of the powers attaching to the right of ownership are exercised. But there is no question of title of ownership, but of the attributes of ownership. The most important is the control that one person can exercise over another. If we draw a parallel between slavery and surrogacy, what do we have? When the surrogate mother is recruited, she loses all her fundamental rights in favor of the commissioning people. As you might have noticed, we usually speak of commissioning people so as not to use the words of the market, such as intended parents. The surrogate mother is recruited under 3 levels of conditions. Condition included, of course, in the contract, additional condition imposed by the brokers, even by the law or the clinic. For example, multiple embryo transfer. On top of that, the commissioning people can add new obligations: C-section, abortion, special diet, non-necessary medical screening. With surrogacy, there is a total control over the surrogate. In this way, we can make a parallel between surrogacy and slavery. But how does one enter in slavery? Entry into slavery is through human trafficking or condition of birth. Surrogate mothers today don't enter into modern slavery by condition of birth. However, in her article, A Handmaid's Tale in East Asia, Yoshi Yanagiri proved that in East Asia, there were cases of women being born as baby producers for rich couples until 1950. In order to become surrogate mothers, women are being trafficked as defined by the Palermo Protocol. And according to this protocol issued in 2000, trafficking is based on 3 conditions: an action, several means, and a goal and a purpose. An action: surrogate mothers are recruited by the industry under very strict criteria. That's what we talked about a moment earlier. They are also transported from their own home to the IVF clinic, from their country to the country of the commissioning people, or to another country for embryo transfer, and then for delivery of the child. These cases are highlighted in our joint study with enough migrant women in the surrogacy industry. Means: the recruitment of a surrogate mother is carried out on a triple deception, triple lie. The first, that the child is not being sold. The second one, that the surrogate mother is not the mother. Third, that the child she gives birth to is not her own. How come anyone claim that she's not the mother of a child for one cell out of more than 50 billion cells of which the baby will be made up? The purpose is exploitation. Exploitation, for us, occurs whenever a woman gives birth to a child, not for her own parental project, but for the project of a third party, which is the case of surrogacy. In conclusion, we can claim that surrogacy is equal to human trafficking. How is it possible to sell slavery as a reproductive solution? We've seen that on one hand, we have the patriarchal culture, and on the other hand, a powerful market. Both are working together to fuel surrogacy. Here are some of the strategies that have been put forward to achieve this goal: sell slavery as a reproductive solution. The first is to whitewash the practice, using positive terms to hide its violence. Just think at the cleverly coined terms to disguise surrogacy: altruistic surrogacy, ethical surrogacy, solidarity-based surrogacy, it is in Cuba, and humanitarian surrogacy in Vietnam. The second is the hijacking of concepts that once stood for women's or human emancipation. Think of the slogan, "My body, my choice," which is often referred to. With surrogacy, it has been turned on its head. My body, the choice of the commissioning people. On the idea of informed consent, in surrogacy, the consent is simply bought. On altruistic surrogacy, whether paid or not paid, the risk for the surrogate mother is the same. Excuse me. The third strategy is to focus only on the commissioning parents. This is what we call narcissistic compassion. Politicians, journalists, and many people side with the commissioning people because they belong to the same social category, never with the women or the children. Finally, the hiring of lawyers is used to prove and pretend that surrogacy is not the sale of children, that surrogacy is not the exploitation of women, but only the use of their pregnancy services. And it works. The EU Parliament used to condemn surrogacy as such in their annual report on democracy, but now it only condemns commercial surrogacy. In the revision of the Directive on Trafficking in Human Beings, the EU Parliament proudly included surrogacy among the forms of trafficking, but with a wording that implies there is a good surrogacy and that only bad surrogacy should be prosecuted. We have a long way to go, and we still have to work definitely to definitely put surrogacy on the feminist agenda, and from there on the political agenda. Feminists managed to put the right to abortion, rape, feminicide to the political agenda. Why not surrogacy? The answer is we can't yet give global data to show the extent and the impact of surrogacy on women and children. With abortion, rape, feminicides showing data made the difference and helps to make political people aware of the issue. But there is hope. In countries where governments are trying to open up to surrogacy or to move from restricted surrogacy to commercial surrogacy, there are women fighting them. And ICASM is trying to support them as much as possible. But in some countries like Albania, Thailand, Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, we don't have contact. Please help us if you can. Now, as a conclusion, look now at this first picture. This is one advertising for surrogacy. You may have noticed that the surrogate is a Black woman. The second one is the interpretation of this photo, of this picture, by an artist. Surrogacy is there seen as a predatory system. Thank you for your attention. I'm now happy to leave the floor to our friend and courageous partners, Women Against Surrogacy Belgium.
Patrizia Tancredi is from Women Against Surrogacy Belgium, and the title of her talk is A Fight Back Against Attempts to Open Up Surrogacy in Belgium, Creation of Women Against Surrogacy Belgium. So welcome, Patrizia, and over to you.
I'll try to tell you very rapidly the story of our collective. It's the first time there is such a collective in Belgium. But it's not the first time that feminists have opposed surrogacy in Belgium. If we go back to 2016, there was Petra de Sutter. Petra de Sutter is Flemish member of the federal parliament. She's a trans woman, by the way, and she tabled a report. She drafted a report at the Council of Europe, trying to give a frame to surrogacy. And this report was rejected, following the mobilization of women and feminist associations. At that time, they were very numerous to take a stand against this issue. Then we go to November 2021 with a feminist rally that was against the American trade show called Men Having Babies. It's quite well known. And at that time, it was held in Brussels, in a very posh hotel in Brussels. On this occasion, ICASM, International Coalition for the Abolition of Surrogate Motherhood, had organized a demonstration in front of the hotel. And several future members of this collective, of our collective, who already were activists in the Belgian Feminist Association, had taken a part in it. I did take part in it, by the way, sharing the conviction in favor of women's rights, that is the fight against the reproductive exploitation. So some of us were dressed in the characteristic costume, you know, the red costume of the dystopian series, The Handmaid's Tale. And we braved the bad weather and also some insults of some of the participants of the very well-known American salon. Some of them called us bitches at the beginning. Then they just left us. We didn't see them anymore. In March 2022, there was a conference organized on the initiative of Marianne Lentz, who is a sociologist and a lesbian feminist activist, and one of the co-founders of the Rainbow House here in Brussels. And she has an organization called El Tour, and she organized this conference critical of surrogacy. And she invited ICASM and also a woman called Dianne Post, who is the president of the Movement for Equality Between Women and Men. And she's also a member of the Women's University, which is a very important feminist organization here, and that helped us very much. This event, the organization was partially hampered by a pro-surrogacy gay men's association. The funding was cut off, and at the end of the conference, there was the idea of creating a collective of Belgian women against surrogacy. But we had to wait until the end of 2023 for Belgian activists to meet again with ICASM. This time it was in Netherlands, in The Hague, to oppose the Hague Conference of Private International Law, which promotes the reproductive exploitation of women as an acceptable model. Once again, new links were forged after this gathering. I was there too. And from a small WhatsApp group of a really few women, we managed to gather around more or less 20 active women around our collective. And we could organize two things. First thing is a petition. And second thing is an event that was held on 28th of March 2024, this year. So this work is unsurprisingly the fruit of the voluntary efforts of all our members, for which we'll thank them. But I would like to return a little bit against the occasion in which this collective was formed. And the petition is against an opinion called Opinion 86, coming from a bioethical committee. This bioethical committee is quite official committee existing in Belgium, which is made up of experts. So we have doctors, sociologists, psychologists, and so on. And this committee can be addressed by officials, mostly by officials, to give answers to questions concerning bioethics. So the last time this was done, it was the minister, state secretary, how we call it, of health, called Pascal Van den Broek, who addressed the committee and asked for their opinion about the framing of surrogacy. In Belgium, surrogacy is not forbidden, but it's not allowed either. So there is a gray zone. You can do both. Some hospitals do it, but there is no real law about that. So this minister asked the committee what to do should Belgium increase framing of surrogacy. And the answer of the committee was yes, it should indeed. And it was a way of doing it really upsetting, because they also changed words. For instance, instead of saying surrogate mothers, they were called gestators. And all these kind of things, saying that some people are very much suffering in our modern states because for either reasons they cannot have a child. So the duty of the collectivity is to help them, including surrogacy is a way of helping people who are desperate because they cannot have a genetic child, and the genetic child is important. So they also shed a very bad light on adoption, and it's in reaction to this opinion 86. We really went in this reaction. That's why there was a petition and the organization of this meeting. And this is how also our collective found itself under attack. On social medias, after sponsoring one or two publications, we were called right-wing white feminists, and even sometimes fascists or Nazis, white supremacists. Then there were some feminists at heart that defined women's right to prostitute themselves, so on the same line with surrogacies. Men and women came to tell us what it meant to be a feminist, with the reversal of the very well-known argument, my body, my choice. I can remember personally one Belgian collective. It's like a bar, they have social events and so on. And the answer was, no, we are in favor of surrogacy because this is a capitalist word and women have the right to survive by any way. So if they can earn money with their bodies, they have to. It's good. We have to approve that. And so you see also, when you come back to my body, my choice, you can see the link with abortion, because the shortcut has been made several times. If you're against surrogacy, then you're against abortion because you don't respect women's self-determination. Apart from social networks, we've also encountered some surprising reactions from associations. From a small number of associations, we've received total rejection and accusation of intent, such as watch out, they're certainly right-wing, certainly anti-abortion, and so on. And so the conclusion is that if this subject makes people so tense, it's certainly because the stakes are very, very high. And it also shows that part of society, which presents itself as left-wing, agrees with the idea of commodifying women and children, of seeing them as objects, incubators on the one hand, and persons to be given away on the other hand. And this left, which calls itself progressive, feminist, and anti-capitalist, ask women to produce children for people other than themselves and with no desire to have a child, and therefore to put one's health at risk in order to produce these children and allow men to reproduce with their own gametes, with their genes. But the risks of pregnancy are very much concerned, as Marie-Josèphe has already noticed. And so women are being asked to gamble with their health, and for nothing, just out of altruism. This is another topic that comes on. Aren't women already altruistic enough? Who looks after the children, the sick, the elderly, the disabled, and who in general organizes family life, sacrificing desires and so on? We can quote a Belgian feminist and lesbian author, Irene Coffer, who unfortunately died in 2022. And she wrote already back in 2015 in La Revue Nouvelle, a monthly, assuming, if we can assume that money issues can be erased. As feminists, we can only wonder about this altruism, so stereotypically attributed to women, educated and socialized in the sense of sacrifice. And that's the end. That's what an article by several authors show, including Candice Autain, who is the gynecologist in charge of surrogacy requests at a hospital, Saint-Pierre, the main hospital in Belgium, doing surrogacy. And the article is entitled Au cœur du don, la dette. In the gift, the debt is the heart of the gift, and features the testimonies of 5 surrogate mothers. So there were 3, the authors say that there were 3 main reasons for becoming a surrogate mother. First is the gift, which is rooted in the idea of some kind of reparation or debt to the society. Second, the pleasure of being pregnant. And third, financial risks. So in this article, there's not only the idea that women can feel a sense of indebtedness that directly concerns their actions, but also a duty to make reparation for some debts incurred by the previous generation. In corporate terms, for example, those testimonials include the following. There was a woman who decided to become a surrogate mother because her son was in remission from cancer. So this is a debt to the universe. A woman who decided to become a surrogate mother because her own mother had abandoned her. So she felt she had to make amends for her mother's fault, which is the intergenerational aspect of that, which can go back to Adam and Eve. So we have, we've talked about haters, detractors, but we've also received an enormous amount of support. We were supported by 17 feminist associations. I'm not going to introduce maybe all of them, but some of them are very important to know who they are. There was ISALA, an association supporting people in a situation of prostitution. There was the European Network of Migrant Women. There was La Voix des Femmes, the voice of women, supporting migrant women in Brussels. Le Conseil des femmes francophones de Belgique, the Council of French-speaking women in Belgium. Siempre, that means always in Spanish, a support and accompaniment network for Latin American migrant women in Belgium. There was the Collectif des familles monoparentales, who is supporting single-parent families, mostly women. Well, you all know that. There was JUMP, working for a fairer society, with more inclusive businesses. There was the organization I already talked about, lesbian organization El Tour, organizing lesbian and rainbow tours to raise awareness of history of queer history in Brussels. There was Le Monde selon les femmes, where it's following women, a feminist NGO that has been working since 1994 for a world where relationships are built on equality, diversity, and solidarities. There was Make Mothers Matter, an international NGO relaying mothers' concerns at the highest international level. There was El Tourne, an association promoting women artists in the audiovisual sector. Femmes de Droit, supporting and promoting women's rights. There were bigger ones like l'Observatoire des violences faites aux femmes, which aims to take stock of violence against women in Belgium, and whose president is Mrs. Viviane Teitelboom, who is also a Brussels member of the parliament, of the federal parliament, and president of the European Center in the International Council of Women. And I must say she was the only political woman to take part in our event, who took place on March 28th. And so her two organizations supported the petition. There was the Movement for Equality Between Women and Men, which studies gender issues and promotes egalitarian, civic-minded, and sustainable human development. And last but not least, there was the Women's University, which is really the most important association that supported us, giving us venues and all kind of support. And that gives us, that issued a very interesting study about surrogacy already in 2015 and keeps on taking part in it. So this is, these are the conclusion. Unfortunately, we have other bad Belgian news against women, like legalization of prostitution, which is very, very recent. I will not talk about that. It's not today's topic, but it's just to say that fight is far from being finished.
We're going to move now on to looking at international institutions, the UN mostly. And our first speaker is Amparo Domingo. She's the WDI country contact for Spain and currently standing to be an MEP in Spain on a feminist ticket with a big group of fantastic women. And the title of Amparo's talk is The WDI UN Working Group, What We Do and Why It Matters. So thank you so much, Amparo. And over to you.
First, why the group? This is the map of the current states of the signatories for Women's Declaration. So there are signatories from 160 countries, which means that there are people all over the world already aware of the changes that are being introduced in law by the substitution of sex by gender identity or sexual identity, as it happens in Spain. Those changes are gradual. They don't happen at once, at the same, or at, they don't happen at the same time in all countries, but they have a different pace, because every country have a different political landscape, different legislation, different cultures and uses and all that. So usually, even though we are an international organization, usually we work everyone in our country. Even it might be our country of origin, or maybe our country of residence. That's the case most of the time. But at the same time, also because the declaration is started at the beginning as the feminist reaction or feminist reply to Yogyakarta Yogyakarta principles, so-called Yogyakarta principles. And also because we have observed with time that there is this pattern, this way of doing things that really is very similar from one country to the next. It was obvious at some point in the activism of WDI that we had to have an eye at sort of a higher level, the national level. So that's why there's this group, the working group, the UN Working Group, in order to have an eye on bigger multinational, multilateral organizations. Sometimes we speak about things that could be happening at the EU as well, because those changes in those bodies could really influence a lot of the countries at once, because then the trans activists have the excuse to go further in their local activism. So I also would like to say that this group is a sort of the follow-up of a different group we had before. So this is just a collective effort. I haven't participated in all the documents that I'm going to show you or mention, but this is the work that we have been doing so far. So actions. We have had we have participated sometimes in public calls. Sometimes we did send a statement or a letter out of our own initiative, not prompted by any open call. But some of those documents. Some of them are public in our website. You can have a look at the banner at the news side of the womensdeclaration.com website. At news and updates, it goes in reverse chronological order, so you will always have the newest piece of news first, and then you have to go to the following pages to go back in time. So, but in this part of the website, you're going to find the documents that we did find interesting enough to publicize in our website. So from here, we had some work done in 2021, but one of the earliest pieces that we published was this submission to the International Criminal Court on the policy initiative on sexual and gender-based crimes. Dianne is going to talk about this as in its current state, in the 2024 state, 2 years after this document we sent. And the thing is that already there we were concerned because some information was going around about the use, how the International Criminal Court was interpreting the word gender, because by the content we were reading, it was clear that the word gender was being used as in reference to sex. But as you know from the UN, with the work of the SOGI expert, of whom we have already spoken in previous presentations here in FQT, him and other activists at this UN level, they are introducing a new meaning of the word gender. They try to, without changing the wording of the documents, they want to change the meaning and use that gender that was in the US or international documents most of the times is written as a synonym of or a substitute of the word sex. The trans activists want to use that as meaning gender identity or people with some identities. So we already were stating our concern 2 years ago in March 2022 about how the International Criminal Court, a new initiative, was using the word gender, and we were reminding them that that was not a clear term in international law, that they should use the word sex to make it clear that it referred either to males or females. That same year, we published on our website a document that it was our own analysis of the report called Gender Theory that these international experts, independent experts on sexual orientation and gender identity that the UN has. Then the expert was Victor Madrigal-Borloz. As you all know, he's no longer the incumbent of the mandate. Now there's a South African a gay guy as well. But he had Madrigal-Borloz had through an open call where he received some submissions, he wrote a report in 2 parts, and it had a general title of Gender Theory. That paper was his push for legal self-ID as a best practice for all over the world. You can read the statement in full on the web page. You have here the link, direct link to this paper, and this is a snapshot of the beginning of it. As I said, it was first wrote in two parts, called The Law of Inclusion and then Practices of Exclusion. And this is a very interesting document to read because it is a sort of masterpiece in gaslighting. It's really very interesting to see how the mechanics of the manipulation of language work at this level. And this is the document that I have referred in previous presentations. The executive summary, Madrigal-Borloz defined gender as a suprabiological phenomenon. I'm still shocked, as you can see. So this statement by the volunteers from WDI and at the international level is published at our website as well. We have from that year and next year and following, we had some other documents that we prepared. For instance, we signed a letter in support of Rem Al Salem, Special Rapporteur, regarding speaking up for women who have experienced violence for questioning gender ideology. That's I don't think that that statement or that letter is uploaded. Also, there was some submission in relation that was from WDI Canada, but it was in relation to the composition of a panel regarding guidelines for transgender health that was going on at that time. Then this is on the website. You can access it and read it. There were several circumstances going on at the same time. So we had a document tackling all those elements. It's quite complex. I have here a reminder of what happened, and this is I included a snapshot because sometimes we find out about these things just by chance by reading something that pops up on your screen on Twitter. So it would be also very useful for us as an organization if women that maybe they are not active, but find out about some of these situations, maybe you could send us an email or let us know somehow. This, as I said, was a sort of a surprise because this is the Argentinian ambassador at the UN. And this day, last year in March, they said that they had signed a petition on behalf of 28 states from 4 continents that pushing for self-ID. So they did present this document at the Human Rights Council, a 52nd session of the Human Rights Council. So this is a very important moment for trans activists trying to push really, really hard at the UN level to support self-ID. So Women's Declaration International Group got together and drafted a reply exposing why that was wrong and exposing our defense of sex-based definition of women and sex-based rights for women as well. This, as I said, is a document that was addressing different circumstances that were happening at the same time, because, you know, sometimes it's very messy. Different things are happening at the same time. So it's really difficult to keep up with everything that's going on. And that's why I said that it would be useful for us to have some heads up from other women if they had the information. This, as you see, is from last year. And I think next is also from, yes, it's 2023. This was a statement we did in support of the Rem Salem, the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, who had been smeared by the AWID, or one of the ECOSOC feminist organizations that is very well respected and has a lot of influence, had attacked the rapporteur, telling her that she was a transphobe for defending sex-based rights. So that statement is also on our website. And as a piece of information, I would like you to know, because I found out that not so long ago, that there's this man they called Julia Earth. Sorry, slides went off. Julia Earth. He is an autogynephile living in Berlin. He is currently the executive director of ILGA World. He was a signatory of Yogyakarta Plus back in 2017. And he is a member of the board of directors of AWID, which of course would explain the position that this organization took against the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls. So we were defending her. We sent that statement, and we published that also on our website. Then I think the others are not public yet, but we did reply to the Special Rapporteur on Torture on the situation of women in prisons, where self-ID is in place. Also, there was this at the UK level. This was important as well, because there was a review of the there was a review. There's this the acronym is GANRI, is the British. I think Bernadette might help me. Is the sort of the ombudsman is the highest British organism defending human rights in the UK, and trans activists we're trying to remove that special I don't know. Sorry, I'm lacking some English words today. I'm sorry for that, but they were trying to remove those that characteristic that had, and Women's Declaration International also intervened in support of this organization. We have one of the last documents we have produced is the submissions we sent to the another open call for by the Special Rapporteur Rem Salem, and her report about violence in sports against women and girls. There were different groups from WDI intervening, and this is the one that we have published in our website. We are currently working on some other issues, but it will be Dianne who will inform you about that. And I think that's all that I have. I would like to also tell you that at the website, not only at the news side, also at resources, you can find some of the papers and articles related to what I've been explaining. So maybe this is a simpler way to find this document, not mixed at the news websites. You have both ways of finding. So we have a sort of library of resources for you also to take a model if at some point you need that for your activism in your country. So that's all I have today, and thank you very much for your attention.
We're going to hear now from Maria Binetti from Argentina. She is an academic and a specialist in these areas. She's been involved in the WDI work on international institutions, as well as in her own country, Argentina, and written on it at length. And she's going to talk about why the UN and the Inter-American Commission. So thank you so much, Maria, and over to you.
Why UN and why we need a UN working group? That is the idea to explain. The UN is the main target of our international efforts because it constitutes the global platform and trader of gender identity policies. As a kind of supra-state organization, the head of a global government in human rights affairs. Gender identity is actually a creature of the UN, just as gender was before. The ideological product of American universities, financed by the international corporations, and implemented by the UN on a global scale. The UN promotes, facilitates, and enforces gender identity through its several agencies, reports, experts, advisory opinions, treaty body, decision, etc., etc. This huge mass of papers is called the soft law. And although the soft law is not binding, it's usually taken into account by domestic courts and put international pressure on states to take positive actions. In emerging countries like Argentina, UN agencies and programs often exchange monetary and humanitarian assistance for the implementation of these programs and agendas. The UN has set up a real machinery for the production and implementation of gender identity as if it were a human right. To make gender identity into a human right means to dismantle the whole system of human rights, because human rights are for persons, not for self-representations. Doing that, the UN has become the greatest threat to human rights, particularly to women and girls. Human rights. So let's talk about the UN funding. The UN is funded by the member states like US or Japan, the main contributors. However, the wide range of agencies, special programs, forums, missions, etc., are funded separately in a mixed way by countries and by private contributions from companies, NGOs, and private donors. The latest way, the private way of funding the UN has been growing, but often without a transparent and impartial accountability processes. Companies, NGOs, private donors usually have their own agendas and allocate money for specific purposes, in concrete for gender identity recognition and political participation of LGBTQS minorities. Giving money for these specific purposes, these organizations take control and the UN is captured by these private sponsors. Actually, the UN has made several commitments that the consequences of this compromise is independence and impartiality, lead to distorting interpretation and results conditioned by money, produce a language that is not the one agreed by member states, turn the UN into a machinery permeated by political agendas and ideological interests of its sponsors. Thus, we can talk about the sort of privatization of the UN. Take, for example, the case of the independent experts on sexual orientation and gender identity issues, Victor Madrigal Borlos, that Amparo mentioned before. Victor seems to have received generous fees from Arcos Foundation. This is a blog, you can check the information. Victor is very well paid for his reports. He has received from Argus Foundation, well, a lot of money, 100,000 on the one hand and 200,000 on the other hand through Harvard University. Of course, this is conditional money, conditioned to some kind of report. Quite generous has been also the money from, there are many organizations. This page shows some examples. I can show you. For example, Muslims for Progressive Values, or International Fellowship of Reconciliations, or Outright International, ILGA, all these philanthropic corporations give money addressed to the advocacy work on LGBT equality for programs, conferences, experts, advisory opinions. You can see these examples are in this blog. Then the numbers are, for example, 100,000, 206,000 in Outreach International for advocacy work at the UN level. Well, 200,000. These reports and opinions are very well paid. On the other hand, we have the case of the same case, basically the same case, but focus on the Inter-American system. Inter-American systems include the Inter-American Court and Inter-American Commission, also well paid for its reports. There is a careful balanced report, a kind of short book, 30 pages, a short book, reporting the money that the system, Inter-American system, received for this work. The book, yes, here is some example. The book is online. You can find online. I can share the link. Is written by Sebastian Schuft and Maria N. Quiroga, and it explains how the Inter-American human rights system has been captured by the conditional financing from private corporations and NGOs that allocate money for specific purposes. In fact, for gender identity recognition and political participation of LGBT minorities. Under this financial pressure, Inter-American system has created supposed obligations that are not obligations. The court has issued ruling on non-existence, non-compliance, and in the case of strategic litigation cases, usually the same corporations fund the court and the petitioning parties. This is the double standard. This clear conflict of interest is very usual. These companies, these philanthropic companies, pay both sides. Behind the sentences or report of the commission, scholarship, experts, and other projects on gender identity and sexual orientations are, for example, Argus Foundation, Trust for the Americas, Wellspring, Philanthropic Fund, Open Society Foundations, and countries like Holland or Spain. So in the balance, in this book that I mentioned, you can find a detail of the funding organizations and the projects that are financed year by year by this money. You have numbers such $200,000 for some report on on LGBTQ people, and you have those are the numbers: 100,000, etc., etc. So, in conclusion, the lack of independence, bias, and conflict of interest within the UN have turned it into a major political threat. Today, the UN constitutes a power apparatus captured by the ideological project and interests of its sponsors. Within minimal democratic legitimacy, counter-majoritarian agendas, non-agreed language, and axiological imposition, alien to human rights, especially to women and girls' human rights. That's it. I can share the links of the examples I mentioned.
So Dianne Post is an international human rights lawyer. She's been working for women's rights literally since elementary school. She's going to talk about the proposed new draft articles on prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity, what the proposed treaty says, does, and the problem of using only gender in the treaty. So thank you so much, Dianne, for telling us about this, and over to you.
To start with, these draft articles are aiming toward a treaty, an international treaty, on the prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity. So first is the definition of what is a crime against humanity, which pretty much tracks what we already know from the International Court and other treaties, which is any act that's part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population with knowledge that this attack is happening. And the specific acts are murder, extermination, enslavement, mass deportation, torture, and the sexual crimes, rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, forced sterilization, or any other form of sexual violence of comparable gravity. I have to fight about what that might mean. And also prosecution or persecution based on political, racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, gender, or other groups. Now, this is where the gender is never defined, and it does not say sex or women at all, just gender. Enforced disappearance, apartheid, or other inhumane acts. It then goes to define these various terms, but it never defines gender. So what the treaty says then is that you have an obligation not to do these things and an obligation to prevent others from doing these things. If you sign this treaty, which isn't a treaty yet, but should you sign it, you have to make it a crime in your own country, establish national jurisdiction over this crime. Should it happen, you have to investigate thoroughly and impartially, take preliminary measures, such as putting the accused persons in custody and protecting the witnesses and victims, to try the person there, the accused person in your country, or if you're not going to do that, send that person to the state that is asking for the person who committed these crimes. Now, it also specifies, obviously, for the rule of law, that the alleged offender should be treated fairly, and victims and witnesses should also be treated fairly, be able to tell their story and get damages from what was done to them. Then there's a section on extradition to the state that's asking for the person, that states give each other, and states, of course, means countries, that states give each other mutual legal assistance, how they settle disputes between them, how to run the system, and sign up to the treaty. So that's what the treaty is about. Now, how did we find out about this treaty? Well, there were rumors about changing the term gender in the ICC, in the Rome Treaty at the International Criminal Court. Well, as Amparo said, you can't just change a word in a treaty that all these other countries have signed on to. So I knew there was something that was wrong about that. Now, you can change the interpretation of that word and how it's used, but you can't just change the word. So in the ICC, this is the definition of gender. For the purpose of this statute, it is understood that the term gender refers to the two sexes, male and female, within the context of society. The term gender does not indicate any meaning different from the above. It doesn't take a lawyer to understand this has some problems. It is the result of some major battles that were at the negotiation of this particular treaty between people that wanted gender and people that wanted sex. This was the resolution that they came up with. So the people who wanted sex feel like they won because it refers to the two sexes, male and female. But the people who wanted gender think that they won because it says within the context of society. So that's the phrase they're using, the gender group is using to try to say, well, things have changed since this was filed and the society has moved on and, now we have to use gender. So that's where they're pushing that based on the language, the actual word, the definition that's in the ICC. So this potential treaty, this draft, has already been vetted and drafted through the International Law Commission. And from there, it goes up to the sixth committee. This is the last step before it goes out to the countries for potential signing. So this sixth committee has this, and they have a meeting in November. They did not ask for submissions, but we're going to send it anyway. This treaty has actually been in the works for 13 years. We obviously did not know about it. This organization didn't even exist 13 years ago. So it wasn't possible that we could have worked on it from the beginning. But so we drafted a 17-page document responding to the issue of using only gender in the treaty, not defined at all, because they know if they try to define it, they're going to get into the same battle that they had at the ICC. So you can read this document on the website as soon as it gets up. I guess it's not up yet, but I can tell you, or because of the time, I'm going to skip over how it was actually done, which you don't really need to know that anyway, and just go to the end of it. And I start out by not just hitting him in the face with, you have to use sex, because if I do that, they're going to do exactly what they always do, just throw it away. You're a transphobe. We're not going to read this. So I have to kind of ease into it before I actually get to the part where I say you have to use gender. And I also use arguments that were also made during the 13 years that this treaty has been under consideration. There were people who objected to this, but there were far more people who didn't. And the usual groups have weighed in. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, SOGI, all of these kinds of groups have weighed in. But there were some groups and there were some countries during the discussions of this that wanted gender to be defined or wanted to use sex instead of gender. So I had to read all of that and then use those arguments as well to convince them that they've missed a very big point here. So in the conclusion of the document that we're sending to them, and in this document, I also ask for us to be observers at the November session and for us to be able to speak at the November session, since we have not been able to speak yet. I don't think either one of those things will be granted, but at least we ask. So here's from the conclusion. If the goal of the treaty is to draft provisions that are effective, using gender rather than sex will not address the underlying structural basis of inequality leading to violence. Now, they do say, while they're talking about crimes against humanity, this is violence, right? They do admit that internationally, violence against women is a huge issue and getting worse. And so that was a major reason to do this and put that section in there about all these sexual crimes. So I have to focus back on that. You're not going to fix that by doing this. The treaty should focus on the victims, and legal protection should not be eviscerated for women and girls who are the focus of violence the world over. And again, during the discussions of this, they did admit that it was women and girls who are the focus of violence. They're civilians, and yet they are targeted for all of those kinds of things that we know about have happened in many of the genocides and many of the wars that are were ongoing and are ongoing. The conflation of the category of sex with gender hinders the protection of women and girls from violence perpetrated against them by boys and men. And of course, I go into the issue of you can't have valid statistics, you can't have decent programs to correct the problem, because any program you make up, for example, giving free feminine hygiene products to women, will be challenged by men because they will say, well, I don't get a period, so it's not fair because you're discriminating against me and I'm a woman. So it will just eviscerate any of the issues, the problems, and ways to possibly solve them.